But I think what's important is knowing that you can't delegate your activism to other people because only you can do the activism that's for you.
The Empire Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Empire. And we are here with Vonya Quarles, the co-founder and executive director of Starting Over Inc., which deals with a lot of homelessness, incarceration, and justice, foster family system, and much other things that we're going to get deeper into. And so thank you guys for joining. And thank you, Vonya, for coming. And welcome to The Empire.
Thank you for having me, Antonio.
Awesome. And how's your day been?
It's still early. So far, so good.
Okay, so early bird gets the worm, as they say, right?
Yep.
Gotcha. Did you get the worm?
No, I wasn't that early.
Oh no! So only rats and dust for you?
No, I wouldn't say that either. I didn't get the worm, but I had a nice oatmeal breakfast with scrambled eggs and some beef sausage. So I did pretty good.
Okay. Do you put the eggs in the oatmeal?
No,
Okay. I don't know why I thought that.
no, I didn't do that. And I only had breakfast because someone was there nice enough to prepare it. I'm not really a breakfast person, but so that was really nice.
Oh, so you woke up to a beautiful breakfast then? Mm-hmm. Oh, so the worm was brought to you.
Yeah, yep, okay, all right.
I like that. The worm was brought to you.
You could call it a worm, but I think it was more tastier than a worm. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. Yummy. Yummy. Hey, for those worm eaters out there, yummy. Vonya, for people who may not know who you are and the things that you do, can you please let all of us know who you are and the things that you do?
My name is Vonya Quarles, and I live in Moreno Valley, California. I was born and raised in California and came to the inland region in 2008. What I do is I am the executive director of Starting Over. Starting Over Inc. is a nonprofit that provides transitional housing and reentry services to people that are coming home from jail and prison. We also have found ways over the course of the last 15 years to work in the intersections of criminal justice and other justice issues like housing, family, economic. All those are areas of justice that we have come to explore during our work.
Wow. Okay. And you've been doing this for how long, would you say?
Starting Over is 15 years old.
Okay.
And before Starting Over, I had done some work around the death penalty, issues like that, but nothing ever like putting my whole self into the work until Starting Over. And that came about, I think, for a lot of reasons. I had paroled from prison, got work in an oil refinery. They weren't doing background checks then. So I went to work in the oil refinery and I stayed there. I had a GED when I got there. And then I ended up going to school at night and got a bachelor's. And then I went to law school. And then I ran into this dynamic human being named Susan Burton, who showed me that there are a lot of people that care and that I didn't have to run and hide from my past.
I love that. And speaking of past, we like to go deep, like the abyss, we like to say here, into knowing who people are and things like that. So, like I said, we like to go deep into people. We like to. Some people just want to go surface level, but I think we're all icebergs, right? You know what I mean when I say that? Mm-hmm. I saw you it's like icebergs. What does that mean?
I was just thinking because I like to be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
I had to develop that skill early on in life. And so I was doing that, and I'm like, is everyone an iceberg, or do some people show us their whole self from the very beginning? Is there always a deepness to an iceberg that we don't pick up on, or are some people just what they are on the surface? I don't know, but I'm with you.
Yeah, you with me? Okay, maybe,
I'm with you.
Maybe we might go into that. Does everyone? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Do you think that everyone shows themselves right when you see them, or do you think everyone always has a little bit more to them? I don't know. Let's ask that. But speaking on that, Vonya, can you give us a brief story about how you grew up, where you grew up, all the way to the timeline of where we are today?
Oh, wow, that's a long time for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. If you could give us like I
That
say, a
is a
brief history.
long,
If you
long
could give us,
time.
the highlights, as they say,
Yeah,
the
okay.
highlights.
I was born and raised in California, and
Which part of California?
Southern California, LA County
Okay.
primarily. We moved around a lot. I was born at Harbor General Hospital in Carson. I think they had just opened up that one. There was a big general downtown, and then there was this Harbor General. I think I was born in Harbor General, and we moved around a lot. And I spent 5 or 6 years in foster care. And with my mom, we moved around a whole lot. She wasn't in the habit of paying rent. She would pay rent once or twice, Antonio, and it was like, what the heck? The landlord needs to fix this. And the landlord did need to fix stuff, but we also probably should have paid rent. But so I moved around a lot, which was really a good thing in a lot of ways. It enriched my childhood. It was all in LA County, but from San Pedro, Wilmington, South LA, around 73rd and Hoover, Imperial and Figueroa. And then when I got grown, it was Agora, the Valley, Wilmington, San Pedro, up until 2008. And that's when I came to the inland region. And I always thought that this place was too far away. And I never thought I would live there. I worked with people in the refinery, and they were commuting from Moreno Valley and Riverside, and I just thought that was a different world. The housing market is what attracted me to this region. The costs were so much better than LA. And so I came to the inland region in '08. We starting over in '09, and I have fallen in love with this region, not just because of the housing, even though that was attractive at first, but just because of and I don't want to say ease of the life, because I don't want to sound like I don't recognize the struggle it is for many of us here. But there seems to be a quality of life here that was better than the quality of life I had in Los Angeles. And the people here are more natural, more authentic.
I've heard that before, which is so strange. Is that I guess people are more fake out, I guess, in LA than they are out in here.
I think I wouldn't want to say they're more fake, but I think they are under the influence of what's around them. Hollywood,
It's like keeping up with the Joneses.
right. It's a whole different lifestyle, and the expectation of what makes you happy is different than out here. So,
As opposed to out here, just going to an orange tree and picking some oranges might make you happy or something like that.
and it does.
Yeah. So do you have any siblings or anything like that?
Yeah, I have 5 siblings. I have a sister in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. I have a brother in North Carolina. I have 2 brothers in California and a sister in California, Long Beach. She's the owner and operator of Shades of Africa, which was a family business we started about, 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that located in Crenshaw?
No, it's actually in Long Beach,
Okay.
which is probably about 30 minutes, depending upon traffic, from LA,
Okay.
from the Crenshaw area
Got you.
or the Lamert area.
And so I believe, did you mention something earlier about foster system and foster care and growing up in that? So as kids, were you guys all together during that period of time? How did that work?
Yeah, we were. There was one brother that was separated, and he was adopted out. His birth name was James Anthony Clark.
Okay.
But the other, and I had 2 other siblings at the time. The other ones weren't born yet. But the 3 of us were in one foster home the second time. The first time I was in a home alone without any of my siblings, and the experiences there were not good. And when I went back into foster care, they did place the 3 of us together.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. And so, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but what made you want to come out here? Just, because I know you were saying before, it felt like it was too far, which I'm saying it's too far from probably LA, right? So what made you even come out here in the first place? Because I know you said you found the rent attractive, but what made you even point this direction to come out this way? What pointed you out this direction?
It wasn't the rent that was cheaper, it was the opportunity for home ownership. And
Oh.
so I had, while working in the refinery, you get paid pretty good. And so I had a pretty low standard of living when it comes to how much we were spending. So we weren't caught up in the LA shuffle and hustle of the Joneses and trying to keep up. We were, no, you guys will not wear designer clothes. No, we're going to do this. And we had started the Shades of Africa business. And so we were trying to, raise a family and be a good example of what we thought we should be. And so we had purchased a property in LA and another property in LA, and we didn't sell either one of them. So we had a property, but when I was ready to purchase again, I was priced out of the market. I wasn't going to sell the property I had, didn't want to take loans out on it. And so I wanted to purchase, had some coins. And when I came out here and saw the way your houses were compared to what was in LA, there was no comparison. You could get so much more for your money here. And so when we came out here, we got like a 4,000 square foot house, and it was less than $425,000, which we thought was a lot at the time, and it was.
Yeah.
But it was, and we couldn't see anything like that. We were looking at, 500,000 and over for tiny, 900 square foot houses that were 60, 70 years old.
Yeah. And this is in 2008, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that during the housing crisis during that time?
If I would have known it was going to be as long as what it was, we probably wouldn't have bought. But yeah, it was. And that's when I think the market was crashing. And that's probably why so many houses were on the market. And the crisis lasted so long, we almost lost the house that we purchased.
Wow.
Because we weren't paying the mortgage, and so we were able to save the house and finally get a refinance deal. But we had one of those subprime loans to come out here, and when it adjusted, we couldn't swing it. We were able to save it at the last hour. It was probably like 6 days before the foreclosure.
Wow.
Yeah.
At the time the banks saved out a bunch of businesses, but they didn't save like residential? Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Wow.
That's when they created that thing called NACA. And I think that was under the Obama administration. They came up with this program called NACA, and they had a whole bunch of counselors talking with homeowners and trying to save people's homes. But I know so many people that lost their homes.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. I think there was a movie called, I want to say The Big Something. I know it's got, oh God, it's so many great people. You guys, The Big Short. The Big Short. It's about the housing crisis and the whole scheme. But, I wanted to address something because I think you mentioned you worked for an oil refinery and they didn't do background checks. Can you explain what happened? Because usually background checks are usually related to like criminal history or something like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So background checks have become the norm for employers to have done for potential candidates. There was a time, though, they would ask the question on the application, have you ever been convicted of a crime? But there wasn't this whole industry to do the background checks and report out and all this stuff. And at the time that when I paroled from prison, I went straight to work in the refinery. They asked me the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And, I was 26, and I don't know how a person convicted of a felony is supposed to look, but when I told them no, I hadn't been, they took me at my word. They never did the background check. And for 19 years, I was looking over my shoulder like, are they going to find out? Are they going to find out? So it wasn't, it wasn't that I wanted to come in and just be dishonest from the get-go, but I knew and understood if I would have said yes, I was convicted of a felony, I never would have got that job. And that job was a ticket to a whole new life and lifestyle that I had never had before.
Wow.
I grew up on the streets. I developed critical thinking skills from those streets and having
Okay.
to make, snap decisions. I made a lot of bad choices, got myself incarcerated. And when I came home, I believed that I had served my debt to society. But the way our system is set up and structured, you don't serve your debt by serving time. If you don't understand the system, you could pay for that offense for the rest of your life, unless you have a privilege where you can be convicted of 30 plus felonies and it doesn't stop your accessing anything on the planet.
Can you give us an example of someone or something that may have experienced that?
What do you mean? I mean, okay, so we are living in a time where the person who's going to be sworn into as a president of this country has been convicted of 36 felonies. The work that we've done over the past 15, 20, 25 years has been to humanize people with criminal convictions. But during this past campaign, we heard people bantering the words felon, convict, he's convicted, and in reference to a person that's never going to have to carry the weight of the consequences of incarceration or conviction. He's not going to be incarcerated, and he'll never carry the burden that millions of us have carried as a result of our convictions. He holds the highest office, some would say, in the world.
Yeah. Most regarded, definitely.
And
At least popular.
And he's setting back the language. Not just him, it's not him, it's the media, it was the campaign opponents who wanted to quickly get rid of him by referring to his felony conviction status. One, it didn't work, and two, it hurts the very people that carry the weight of the burden of this country and have historically carried it. So I think that was expedient to those, campaign folks, but it's hurtful and harmful to us.
So I guess a lot of people who would get away with having multiple felonies and criminal convictions would be people of a different class system, would you say?
Definitely.
Okay.
Antonio, you could probably speak to this. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is. If you have money, power, privilege.
You can get away.
Go
ahead.
I was having a conversation with someone, and they were talking about accountability. And it dawned on me, the only people in this country who are held accountable are the poor and powerless.
Okay.
That it shouldn't be that way. It's like, what is this? What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I heard someone mention recently, they said superiority only exists if you don't have to, if you can get away with doing things and not be accountable for it. And he used the example of like, he was basically saying, you have a superiority in the world, or in our case, in the nation of America, if you can get away with killing somebody and not suffer the consequences, talking about cops, which is against the law. But if someone who is a Black American happened to tell a white woman that was an officer, you can't do that, and they have to suffer the law, then they say that's the example of what true superiority is, or like, not dealing with consequences like you're saying, or to be able to walk past the law without any judgment or any fear of being prosecuted by the law, which is a very interesting take.
It is, and it's probably quite true. And we see that more and more. There was a man I had the pleasure and opportunity to meet before he made his transition. His name was Ruchell Mcgee. Okay. He was from Louisiana. He was arrested at 15 in Louisiana for allegedly attempting to rape a white woman. At the time of his trial, Black people could not testify against white people. So all his family members who knew that he and this woman, this older woman, had been in a relationship. And when it came time for his sentencing. They sentenced this 15-year-old little kid to 8 years in Angola State Prison for attempting to rape this white woman, whom even her neighbors had seen Ruchell Mcgee there. And I thought that was bad. This same man would come to California upon release from Angola prison because Louisiana told him he needed to get out of the state. He left the state. His mother left him property in the state, which, when I looked through his paperwork, some kind of way was sold to someone else without even his signature or knowledge. He comes to California, as Louisiana told him to, and he was arrested because of a $5 bag of weed and him getting into a fight with some guy at a Tropicana nightclub, over a young woman who was there, whom they both had eyes for. They give him a 1 to life sentence. They charged him with a robbery or theft of an automobile because of some keys. It was a hazy situation. So he ends up in prison here as a young man. He's probably 21 or 22. He is in the Marin County courtroom in 1970 when Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson's brother, came to the court with weapons they were supposedly had gotten from Angela Davis, and there's a shootout at the courthouse. Everyone's dead except Ruchell Mcgee, who happened to be in court that day to testify against officers for killing people in the prison. None of the bullets belonged to Ruchell Mcgee or Jonathan Jackson or anyone else who was part of this revolt. Ruchell Mcgee being the only survivor, well, him and the man who was a DA who became a judge. So those were the two survivors. Ruchell Mcgee spent 67 years of his life in prison. Even though none of the bullets were from any of their weapons, they all came from the correctional officers' guns, and he spent 25 of those years in solitary confinement. So I met him because we pick people up when they're released from prison, and we were asked to pick him up. And he was 83 years old when we picked him up, and he survived for 3 months. And that is the way that our men, our fathers, our grandfathers are given back to us. And so when I began to do research and learn more about Ruchell Mcgee, I didn't see a bad person. I learned about someone who was so committed to Black liberation and Black freedom that he sacrificed his whole life. He could have done a lot of things while in there, but he became a what they call a jailhouse attorney, and he helped other people become free, even though he knew he would never be free. They ended up releasing him on what they call compassionate release. It's basically releasing people home to die. And he was able to come home and spend time with his cousin, and she cared for him. And from that, we decided to create a Ruchell Mcgee Community Land Trust, so that when other people who have spent much of their life in prison come home, they can come home and enjoy the dream, the aspiration of home ownership that's not based upon the market prices of housing, which, if we know anything about housing today, we know that the prices are high, and most of us could not afford to get into this market today. And so we want to make that an opportunity for other people, and we want to lift up the name of Ruchell Mcgee, because most people never heard of him and won't hear of him.
They'll hear of him now.
I hope so.
They'll hear of him. They just did.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. Ruchell was his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's interesting because it reminds me, I think people were saying that once slavery ended, all of a sudden prison systems existed. So it's kind of almost like slavery never ended. They just called it something different. But I won't go too deep into that. But what I am curious about, because I know you mentioned you got your street smarts from being on the streets, your critical thinking, I guess is a nice way to say. But if you don't mind sharing, what did you get locked up for? What was the reason?
Um, drugs, sale, possession, theft, petty theft with a prior, prostitution. Uh, I think I would have done just about anything to keep getting high. I was what some people used to call a crackhead.
Okay. They still call them that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm no longer ashamed to that. I am ashamed. I'm no longer ashamed for that. It is the reality of where I was, and where not just me, but so many of the people that I loved and cared about. During the 80s, crack cocaine came into our communities with a rush. And most of us, at least for me, I had always been taught not to shoot anything, that smoking was okay,
Okay.
right?
Stay away from needles.
Yeah, don't
Okay.
touch needles. Don't
Okay.
ever let nobody, put a needle in your arm. And so when cocaine came out, people were smoking it. A lot of us felt that it was safe because we were smoking it. And before we knew it, we were in too deep. I had a girlfriend who had childhood diabetes, and she had the most beautiful voice I had ever heard. Her name was Charlotte, and she would sing, and we would be using drugs and singing. She went from being able to sing to losing her feet and then her legs because of the diabetes and the addiction. She was unable to take care of herself. And by that time, I was living in a housing project in Wilmington, and all the lights were off, but we had to keep the gas on because we needed the gas to light our pipes. And so she was at the stove trying to light a pipe, and she passed out. And so we called the ambulance. Thank goodness we could stop long enough to do that. We called the ambulance, and we never saw her again. She was dead, and no matter what the cause of death said, we knew what it was, but we couldn't stop. And that's how heavy and harmful crack cocaine was to our community and devastating. And then you fast forward it 20, 30 years into the future, we see a similar epidemic with crystal meth, with pharmaceuticals, and now with fentanyl.
Yeah.
The difference between what we saw with meth is the way people were treated. It was a health issue then. When it was black folks and crack, lighting pipes off a stove, it was criminal. And we were treated as criminals. We were the crack mothers birthing crack babies and super predators. And so the treatment was a lot different. And I think it is a health issue. And I don't, withhold or begrudge it being treated that way today. But what troubles me is that when the faces of the people who are using change to black, does it become criminal? When the faces change to brown, does it become criminal? And
Yeah.
why? Why?
Defeat the system, I guess. It's so interesting because this reminds me, this even goes back to the class thing, and it makes me think about Hunter Biden, and it made me think about Hunter Biden earlier, and now it's making me think about him again regarding, the drugs and stuff like that. And it also reminds me of a line that Paul Mooney says, which is like a complexion for the selection for the protection, and yeah, I think it's it's an unfortunate burden that people like you and I have to deal with. People that look like, people with melanin enriched people, as we can say. But I think it also shows our perseverance, through the society, and I guess through life in general. And what I wanted to ask you, because I want to assume that, do people ever assume that you're not black and they assume that you're other?
All the time, Antonio, all the time. And it used to trouble me. It used to bother me, especially as a kid. What you mix with, what are you? You ain't black. My mother was Lakota and Irish. My father's a Geechee or Gula from South Carolina.
Okay. Can you
And
explain what those are for people who may not know those
okay,
terms?
Lakota, those are indigenous folks, and some people call them Sioux. They call themselves Lakota. And the Irish, I'm sure everybody understand what that one is. And the Geechees, or the Gullahs from the Carolinas, are African descendants who kind of held on to some of their culture and practices, and many of them thrived off the coast of South Carolina for many years, and they still today, and they're still holding on. They're a strong, independent people. And so my father is of the Geechee and Gullah people of South Carolina. So yes, so there is this combination. Culturally, I am Black. My mother was Irish and Indian, but her people had cut her off when we were born because of her relationship with my father. And so culturally, she was Black. You couldn't tell her she wasn't Black at times. And don't let her get some fire water in here. Irish and Indian, neither one of those folks should drink.
Okay. And the combination definitely shouldn't eat.
No disrespect to anybody or their, affinity to have some fire water if they want it. But for her, it just was toxic. She died at 40, natural causes, as a result of alcoholism and physical abuse. And so it was hard for her to carry. My father, he went into the military at 17, and he developed paranoia schizophrenia while in the military. So he ended up getting discharged. And I think my mom just thought he was eccentric.
Okay. Oh man, he's talking to the walls. That's so cute of him.
And he drifted up and down the coast of up and down the West Coast for 40 years. He hadn't seen his mom, hadn't seen us. It was just completely out of touch with everyone who loved him and cared about him. And so we didn't know what had happened. We felt abandoned. It felt like abandonment to us until, 40 years later, he called his mom Collect. He remembered her number and he called her Collect. But basically, he had been untreated for his mental health condition and drifted. They found him. The public health people found him, and they got him into a boarding care facility. So he had been there 5 years before he called his mom. But when he called her, she called me, and when she got her phone bill, that was back in the days of the landline. When she got her phone bill, she could see where the call was from. And we got the number, and we went and began visiting with him and, having a relationship with him. Not what we wanted, but what was.
Yeah.
And so he was institutionalized by that point and wasn't comfortable leaving or staying. And we were trying to get him to stay and be,
with us.
Yes. And he had his own ideas. But it was a blessing to meet him. And I had joined a 12-step fellowship because of my own addiction. And it had helped me to understand acceptance as being key and how important forgiveness is. And so I was able to love him past my own resentments and enjoy 8 years with him before he made his transition.
Wow. It makes me wonder, because is sometimes faith in God part of the 12-step program?
It is. It's
Okay.
definitely, that's the first step.
Aha.
Yeah.
I wonder how, I'm going a little sidetrack, but it's part of our show. How hard do you think it is for people to accept the 12-step program if they don't believe in God?
So the difference between, say, the 12-step program and a religion is that you get to create your own concept of God. Okay. And so some people will use the rooms themselves as their higher power, and they use the term higher power. So it can be whatever you're comfortable with. There are even atheists who there's a 12-step fellowship for folks who are atheists, and they come to believe in something. I don't know what. I believe in God, and I believe that that is what saved me from myself.
Amen. Yeah, I like that. I like that. When you mentioned Indigenous, 'cause I think you mentioned your mother was Indigenous and Irish, right? It reminds me because I know there's a talk, and some people would like to fight that dark-skinned people, melanated people, were Indigenous people here on the land. Any thoughts or comments about that?
I think the facts speak for themselves. When you look at crops, for example,
Okay.
you look at yams, sweet potatoes, those came from Africa.
Hmm.
When you look at corn and some of the other crop that were here, those were taken back. So we know that there were
Relations.
voyages. There were
Yeah.
voyages
Hmm.
between the people. Africans were coming here long before colonialism was even thought about, and they began to trade, but it was never for the purpose of conquering.
Oh yeah.
So it was different, right? And
Hmm.
so you see a lot of indigenous people with the genomes that belong to African descendants because that's the way it was. Whether the people that we look at today as being indigenous were from Asia or Africa, we know where life began. There's no way getting around that. No matter what Bering Strait or otherwise that you came through, you came from Africa. And so when those conversations, and they're getting popular, I mean, there are a lot of different groups who say that the people here that we identify as indigenous people are not really the indigenous people to this land.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're saying they're not the ones, that it was Africans here all the time, which is, it could be to the extreme, but I think to get into that discussion or argument is to miss the whole point of how we can share and have shared with whoever was on this land when Africans began to come down here. It was in a spirit of sharing and
100%.
sharing culture, sharing ideas, plumbing, all that stuff came from African navigators and explorers who were willing to share and didn't understand the need or the desire to try to conquer people. That's foreign.
Yeah. They came with gifts and love as opposed to weapons and destruction. Blankets
Yep.
of nastiness.
Smallpox. Yeah.
Yeah, blankets of nastiness. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that you bring that up because that would change the whole the game about like um who would get like indigenous grants and stuff like that when going to the aspect of you know melanated people, black African people that look like that would also be considered indigenous, how that would open the grant possibilities and stuff like that. I wonder, but I think maybe there's a reason why they're not categorized like that, maybe for a reason.
You know what? There was somebody, and I didn't check the source, that was telling me about this thing called $5 Indians. And it was where people could pay $5 and get added to the polls or the scrolls of who was indigenous or not. And so people that had $5 could go and be added to it. Because if you notice, there's I mean, you can't put a color on being indigenous, right? It's like
Okay.
they got the whole spectrum.
I've seen white with red hair
Yes.
considered to be. But I tell people I'm Latino, and they look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah, yep. And that's I think is where we're at now in terms of allowing ourselves to be divided by things that aren't even real. Like, I carry blackness as the gift and blessing that it is, because it is. But it's also a modern construct that really doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. But because we carry it, it becomes our life struggle to fight for it. When maybe it's the class, maybe it's something else, which is also a modern construct. All these modern constructs get in the way of me seeing you as my brother, or me seeing you as my sister, or you as my auntie. These are things that further colonialism and capitalism at their core. They don't serve the people at all. It shouldn't matter whether I'm black or whether I'm indigenous or Irish. That shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But it does far too often and far too much.
I guess if you keep the people divided and fighting amongst each other, that's how you can get the control.
That's why we have so many billionaires cropping up. They've got the formula. All we have to do is keep fighting each other over the crumbs.
Yeah.
I mean,
Those-
look at water.
Yeah.
Water is privatized now.
Oh yeah.
We are going into a climate crisis without access to the one thing that can cool us off.
That part. I think people sell oxygen too. I think you could get like 100% oxygen if you want some. I
Wow.
got some oxygen. Hey, baby, I got some oxygen if you need some. You know, how much you want to hit? I got 20 minutes of oxygen for you. What you want, baby? 100%.
Yeah.
Can't get it anywhere else.
I'm gonna get some oxygen on my mama credit.
Okay, yeah, hey, come on. We got EBT friendly oxygen. It's not 100%, but it'll get you what you need to get to.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's going back to the whole divide and conquer thing. I think it's genius. I think it's genius because how else can you stay in power if you don't keep people distracted on focusing on something dumb, right? And how can that not be considered? You know, you could say it's evil genius, but it also says a lot about the people who are focused on the little things to fight about, right? And I think it also takes a spiritual thing, which I think is really hard now, more and more nowadays, especially as we get more entrapped in social media, trapped in living a lifestyle and this illusion that people need to learn how to just like step out of it and be kind of a part of nature and breathe and realize, hey, there's bigger things out here that can heal me, heal our soul. And I think going back, I think, shout out to Ipiani, we both know Ipiani. I think a lot of the people that are suffering and bickering and fighting, they're hurt and they need healing. They need some internal healing to help them grow beyond the fighting over the little stuff. What do you think?
I agree totally. I think there are different ways that people go about it, but I think that's our whole journey. And many of us are on that journey. And hopefully we make it. Because the one thing that gives me peace and freedom is knowing that when I leave, I take nothing with me. And when all these, folks who think that building wealth, they're creating, these divisions amongst the people to fatten their pockets, they're not taking theirs with them either. They can pass it on or do whatever, but none of us get to take anything with us. And if we carry too much, we might not make it to where we need to go when we transition. I want to leave light. I want to rest well with my ancestors, knowing that I've done what I was supposed to do in the short time that I have here. I don't want to go and spend my eternity in hell because I failed to do what I was sent here to do or put here to do. And for me, I have found a purpose in the work I do, in the lives that I get to touch. My children, my grandchildren, the community that I'm part of, the ecosystem that we've created here. I like that.
I love that.
Yeah, I like that.
So basically, you don't have the same mindset as the Egyptians, the Pharaoh Egyptians had.
Oh, when they get buried with their stuff?
Yeah, all their stuff. You weren't thinking like them.
I like the Egyptians. A lot of what they have taught us, like ignorance is the worst kind of sin, man, know thyself. A lot of those Egyptian proverbs or sayings carry weight, but I don't know about, taking stuff into the afterlife. Maybe. What do you think?
I think they were so smart, but so I guess this is twofold. So mostly it's the pharaohs, like the royalty that took their stuff, right? But most likely the pharaohs are the ones who came up with like the beautiful proverbs that we're speaking of, right? The pharaohs are probably like, nah, I'm taking this with me. I don't care what y'all think. I'm gonna cut up. You say no, I'm gonna kill you. So I'm taking this with me. I don't care about what you're saying, So yeah, that's what I think. And yeah, I do think Egypt, which is in Africa, people forget, and that's a different conversation that we won't get into. But what I do want to get into is I want to talk a little bit more about starting over incorporated. Okay. So when it comes to starting over Inc., Why did you start it? Or why did you decide to start it?
Um, I got sober in 2002. And when I got sober, I was such a horrible drunk and an addict prior to that, that everybody had left the house. The whole family, we're out of there.
Okay.
And so, upon getting sober, I realized that there were a lot of women who didn't have the opportunity to have a safe place to call home as they, changed their life as they were getting sober. Some of them were in relationships that were toxic or volatile, and so they needed something else. And so I was in a house in Lakewood. It was a 4-bedroom. My boys were with their dad. We were in the midst of a divorce, and something just said, you know what? You could open this up and let other women come in here.
Like a group home?
Yeah, it was like a what we call like transitional or sober housing. The only thing they had to do was agree not to drink or use drugs, and they
Okay.
could come in. And it started that way with one, and then I had purchased another house,
So
and
they didn't have to pay rent. They didn't have to look for a
if
job.
they had money, they had to pay it so they could help share some of the costs. So
Okay.
they would pay like I think $400 or something a month, and then we would just put our ends together. We could cook together if we wanted to or not cook, and then I just started fixing that house up because to brighten it up and make it nice. And that was the first one, and then I did it with another house, and then in 2009, we said, hey, why don't we formalize? Why don't we become, a nonprofit and see? Because I had a 401k, but it was getting all sucked up between college tuition and, maintaining the houses. It was shriveling up to it was
Gotcha.
probably like a 1.0.
Gotcha. It
Yeah.
was getting dry. It was getting dry.
Yeah. So that was leaving, and so we started the nonprofit. The first 7 years that Starting Over was started, it was all voluntary. There was no money to pay anyone. None of us were getting paid, but we were able to pay the bills slowly. So that started to change, and I think it's because of when we started. We started in '09, and that was in the middle of a financial crisis. Nonprofits who had been around a lot longer than we had were shuttering, closing their doors down. And so funders weren't trying to give money to a startup. And couple that with the fact that I wasn't a fundraiser at that time, and that I was a Black leader, which made it challenging on all fronts.
Doors are closing in your face.
Yeah, they didn't trust us or didn't think we could lead. I'm not sure what it was. A combination of everything. Money was tight, and we used to joke. And say I had one friend, and she could go get some money, and we used to say, "Girl, you raise money like a white woman," because the funders would just give her money. They trusted her.
Okay.
And so eventually, I learned how to raise funds.
Gotcha. I was gonna say, was she light skinned?
No, not at all. Her name is Susan Burton, and she is phenomenal. She has stepped down from A New Way of Life as its director, but she started a safe house network. So there are safe houses from Africa to New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
Continue with Starting
Oh,
Over.
okay. Yeah.
It's a quick question I wanted to ask, and maybe you can continue with it. Is what do you think the tricks are? I guess tricks or skills or abilities to be able to fundraise for something.
For me, it was mental. I had to realize that I wasn't begging. Most of us, as Black folks, were taught not to beg. And so being able to make the distinction between raising funds, which is really giving people the opportunity to contribute to a wonderful cause, is not the same thing as begging.
Yeah.
And so learning that, and then learning to spot the money in the room. So I used to go to events, and I would sit there and watch the event, clap when I was supposed to, and I would leave. But then I learned, work the room, girl.
Okay.
Work the room.
Okay, so you put your high heels on, put some red lipstick, and
No, not exactly, but close to it.
okay.
Close to it. I would not just be talking to the people that I knew and loved. I would be talking to strangers who were connected and had access to what we needed, and that was resources. And not in a way that was disingenuous. There are some funders who I've never approached because I don't think we align, but there were lots of funders who did align with our purpose and mission that I had never talked to, and I needed to start doing that. So we went from
How do you spot the money in the room? What are
so,
some of this?
so I was slow. So what I would do is I would watch like the Kim Carters, the Susan Burtons in a room, and
Okay.
I could watch them, and they would lead me right to the money because they already knew.
Okay.
They already knew.
So give us, so now that you know, how do you spot who has the money in the room? What's some of the telltale signs?
Who they work for. So Ford Foundation, that's money. Irvine, that's money. Weingart, the California Endowment, California Wellness, those are all foundations that are connected to money. So when I'm doing the introduction, I'm Vonya, I work for Starting Over, and
Who are you?
and who do you
Got you.
work for? Yes.
Got you.
Yeah.
I'm an employee at 7-Eleven. Okay.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
That sounds so horrible.
Thank
huh?
you.
It's like-
Thank you for your service. I assume you're going to be open 24/7, so I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Yeah.
But please continue with the starting over and why it started.
So we started at first to give women a place to stay, and then the first two houses were for women, and then a friend of mine who was in recovery also had property, and so he let us use one of his houses to turn into a men's home, and so we began to expand. Come 2009, when we starting over, is when we said, hey, let's see if we can actually build this up. By 2009, we had recognized that it wasn't just behavioral issues and challenges that we were helping people to overcome, that if we really wanted to help them, we had to address system causes. Why are we seeing the same people all the time needing a disproportionate amount of services? Why are so many people who look the same class, same color, or same melanin status, always in such great need or in harm's way? And it wasn't because there's something wrong with us. It's not our flaw. We are the only people that are identified by our deficits instead of our assets. And so we do 1,000 good things, but what will get lifted up is a deficit. And so we see that whether it's in P. Diddy, Sean Diddy, or whatever his name is now, or, it's just all the time we live with that. And so for every one P. Diddy, there are thousands and thousands of other Black entertainers who are doing wonderful things, but we're not going to hear about them. And so I was really of the mindset that we must use drugs more than other people. We must commit crime more than other people, because that's what the statistics told me until I knew how to look and what to look for. The racial disparities that come into the criminal justice system start at the streets. So Black people and brown people are pulled over more, they're ticketed more, and they are arrested more. So 13% of every population uses drugs. It's across the board.
Okay. Like an even.
It's pretty much even across all the races.
Okay.
It's 13%.
Even Asian communities?
Even Asian.
That's what I'm saying, because people don't think that.
We myth busting.
Because people don't think that, so I have to throw this out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so where you start seeing the differences is how they're treated. It's not, if it's only 13% of Black and brown people using drugs, there should only be 13% of us who are in court for using drugs. But that's where the disproportionate numbers start to come into play. We are sentenced at 60%, Black folks are, and we are sentenced to longer jail terms, whereas other people can come in, same charges, and be given an alternative to incarceration, something that we don't see enough and we don't invest in enough. And so getting past those myths about who we are, we have to look at how do we change this? And that's what Prop 47 was about. Prop 47 in 2014 changed these petty offenses to be misdemeanors. And the system has not stopped fighting against Prop 47 since it passed by the voters at a 60% pass rate. So they just succeeded in Prop 36. Law enforcement and corporations partnered up to bring to the voters in California what's called Prop 36, which passed overwhelmingly. And it's unfortunate because it's going to take $100 million every year out of health services and put it back into incarceration, to locking someone up in prison for a petty crime.
So that was kind of during the situation where like people would like shoplift, right? Certain money like that, right?
Yeah,
And so now that's no longer a petty crime anymore, right? For example, like shoplifting,
right. If it's, so what they can do now
a
is
certain amount of money, right? A certain amount of.
it was $950, but now with the passage of Prop 36, it could be $950 over a course of time or a series of arrests. So it doesn't have to be $950. You could steal something for $200 today. Could be groceries, could be anything. And then you get caught again and again. So they put it together, and now you no longer have the option of it being treated as a misdemeanor. It's going to be treated as a felony, and you're going to prison if convicted. So what they did around Prop 47 is they said that you couldn't go to jail. People were going to jail for these petty offenses. They just weren't going for as long as the what they call public safety people wanted them to. And what was interesting in watching that whole thing unfold over the last 10 or 15 years is that prison population numbers were declining, and they had to, but their budgets weren't.
Ironically,
So CDCR never gave back any money.
what is CDCR?
California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Okay.
Some people say the R is silent. But so they weren't giving money back, even though they were reducing their numbers. And they reduced their numbers because the 3-court judge panel mandated it. People were dying at the rate of one person a week.
In prison?
Unnecessarily in prison, not counting the people who were dying for a cause or medical condition, but just for no reason. And so that's when, at the time, the governor was Jerry Brown. He came up with what they call AB 109, and it restructured people going to prison, swinging them from prison to county authority in the jails. And so that helped to lower the numbers. Prop 47 helped to lower the numbers of people in prison. And Prop 36 is going to help them swell those numbers back up again.
And where's all the money going?
CDCR. And CDCR will allocate that money to more money for probation, more money for district attorneys, and more money for policing. And that's a pretty interesting investment, because they say what you invest in
Is what you believe in.
is what you believe in, and then where you pay your attention, that's what flourishes. And so if we're going to double down on the notion that incarceration is going to solve society's problems, we lose the opportunity to really invest in what we want. I want to see pathways to opportunity and success for young people. When I was a kid, we used to work for the summer and would get paid good money. And so now we're in a society where there are no summer youth programs. I would like to see my tax dollars go to that, or to have places for young people to go, so that the trajectory isn't school to prison, but school to perfection, or school to whatever it is that our youth need. I don't know what they need to prepare for tomorrow's world. That world is beyond me.
Yeah, AI.
That's one, yeah. Yep. I mean, we have to think about doing that, or we're going to be totally unprepared for a future. And putting money into the prison ain't going to cut it, because mine ain't going. Yours ain't going. We're fighting too hard against a system that has used our children for fodder since its inception, whether it's slave patrol or sheriff. It's the same thing.
Same shit, different island. Tomato, tomato.
Yep.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
You know, and it reminds me, I want to say a couple of things, and hopefully I can remember the other thing I wanted to say. Um, you know, mentioned that what you focus your attention on is what you believe, right? Or what they believe or what they want to see happen,
Yeah.
right? And then we also declared and stated that majority of people that are going into prisons are the disenfranchised, mostly Black Americans, people, brown-skinned people. So it seems as though, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys, if you guys are enjoying this, by the way, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you guys are enjoying this, by the way, that it seems as though the upper to higher class people won't be affected by this Prop 36 change as opposed to lower income families and lower income people. Would you agree?
I would totally agree with that. And when we talk about who's incarcerated, people always seem to conjure up the most dangerous looking person they could imagine. When the reality is almost 40% of the people incarcerated have mental illness. And the data shows that people with mental illness stay longer in jail or prison, and don't do as well. So we're looking at jail deaths across the country because in custody deaths in Riverside County in 2022 were almost the highest in the state, and that's including LA.
Got you. What was the number? Do you remember?
22.
22 people? Mm-hmm. Got you.
22. And it's
That's in 1 year. That's in just
yeah,
the
that's
year.
just in 1 year.
Got you.
That's 1 year, and there's only about a little over 3,000 jail population.
Okay.
So that was a huge number, and one of the highest in record. But the issues, some of them were suicides, and so when we get to talk about accountability, there are governance structures for the county jails and how they operate. And so even if you look at just their own operations, if a person with mental illness covers up their windows and their doors so you can't see in,
Yeah, like black it out type of thing?
yeah,
Okay.
you're supposed to go and check. That doesn't happen. It didn't happen on 3 occasions. And there was one occasion, this young lady was in the Riverside County Jail, and she called the CO through the radio and said, this is a wonderful day too. And they were like, is this an emergency? She said no. And she got off the call, and then the video showed her saying, to kill myself. So she was basically trying to tell the officer that she was going to commit suicide. He shut her down and said, is this an emergency? She said no. And she completed her statement, and she was dead within 20 minutes of that call. And no one came to check. No one found her until hours later. And so for some reason, we put a different value on the lives of people when they're incarcerated, or when they have mental illness, or they fall from the standard of perfection that we hold for ourselves and each other, right? You know, we're perfect, she's not. And so when we allow othering, because that's what it is, when we allow othering to come in and shape our responses to the treatment of other human beings, we are letting colonialism, we are letting corporations rule our thinking. We have to see ourselves and each other. We have to. That's what's going to save us. That's our grace.
It's reprogramming needs to be done.
I wish I knew, Antonio. But you know what? I'm confident that you will know, and that those who are coming up now, new leaders are being born every day, are going to have the answers that we need. There's not a lot left that I can do but pass the torch, right? I'll be retiring in about 1.5 years from starting over. I leave in June of 2026.
Congratulations.
Yes. And I am looking forward to being a witness to the changes. I'm not retiring from life.
Yeah.
I will be working on the Community Land Trust, the Ruchell Mcgee Community Land Trust, and doing whatever the Creator puts in my life and my path to do, I will gladly accept the assignment. But as far as seeing the kind of changes that I want to see, I think y'all gonna have to handle it.
Yeah, we got this. We
All
got this,
right.
and even the ones before us. And I think a really important thing about the reprogramming is the proper representation, right? So for us to be represented in a positive light, so that way people's psyche can change about how they view us. So that way they don't say, oh, even Ipiani, again, shout out to you, Ipiani, he mentioned, he wears a do-rag and people all of a sudden give him a different look just because he's wearing a do-rag, and so maybe if we had a president who wore a do-rag, maybe that might change, maybe Trump with a do-rag might change things about perceptions of us. That's a joke. So Vonya wants to throw up right now. She wants to really? Did he just say that? But
No, not at
ladies
all.
and gentlemen, but basically showing us Black Americans, people of color, but specifically I want to say Black Americans because I think there is a disparity between what we call colorism. And so I think if people could start seeing us in more of a positive light as opposed to this ratchet, drug-filled, whatever, violent people as the main thing, then I know that it will change perception, and perception is everything. If you believe you are what you believe. So if you believe that the world is flat, then the world is flat. But if you see, for example, someone with the do-rag building communities, building community gardens, donating their time to stuff like that, then maybe you might change your perspective of someone who wears do-rags, right?
Yep, definitely. And now I think I know why I be seeing Ipiani sport the cowboy hat. Because and sometimes he'll wear his do-rag underneath the cowboy hat. Ipiani, if you're out there and listening, you are phenomenal. I love you, and I love the work you do and the hope that you bring to the work that we all do. So I just want to say shout out to Ipiani too. And yeah, I think it's a lot. They called it respectability politics. I don't know what they call it now. But that whole thing was based on what our ancestors had experienced and our elders. They looked for ways to shelter us from the discrimination and the judgment and the danger that we faced as a people. And so I remember in the foster home, children were to be seen and not heard. You don't look grown-ups in the eye. When I go down to South Carolina, I still see that kind of teaching and those practices in play in some places. And I believe they were trying to protect us, but I believe that we have to move away, if we haven't already, from the notion that we have to look a certain way to be entitled to the same, treatment as other people here. So, yeah, I remember too, with my son's saggy pants and stuff, I was like, nope, pull them up, pull them up. So I was, at home, it's different. I can say what I want to at home. But to expect people to look the way I want them to look that's probably not my business, right?
Yeah.
And I need to work with people and be open to learning from people. Like, look how much we learn from Ipiani. What is do-rag? So if I can't work with you because you got a do-rag on, or I can't see you because you have a do-rag on, I'm cheating myself.
Yes. There is so many things I want to say, and I'm going to try to remember everything. I asked my parents, or my mom's side of the family, I was like, why didn't Grandpa teach you Spanish? And going back to the things about protection and stuff like that, he didn't, in his time, it's, why need to learn Spanish? You need to know English. Learning Spanish is not going to help you, really. And usually, culturally speaking, the tongue is in the madre. The mother usually teaches the kids the Spanish, or the language and the culture. And so, in his mind, he's probably thinking why do you need Spanish? And I've heard this from other people too as well. It's I remember someone told me that his grandmother was Indigenous, and she didn't want to teach his mom the Indigenous language because then they would be persecuted or looked for and find out. So they just made sure to just only speak Spanish because they would even get persecuted by other Spanish speakers. So it's interesting that the things that people do to try to protect the youth, out of fear, for being persecuted, right? Another thing that I want to go to, I'm going to jump a little bit back because I remember you mentioned about, Black people looking at our deficiencies as opposed to our attributes, right? Or these different words, but I know you know what I'm saying. Deficits and anyway,
Assets.
yes, benefits, I guess you could say. And we talked about P. Diddy, right? And his whole thing that he's going through, which is kind of a interesting thing. Other people have done much worse. But it made me think of rest in peace to the great Quincy Jones, who just passed. And if our society, and I got so upset, I was talking to a friend about this the other day, that if they would have given as much media coverage and respect to Quincy Jones, this legend in the game, that they gave all this publicity to P. Diddy and the Takeoff, the Drip Squad people, murder that's going on. If they would have given half as much attention and respect just to Quincy Jones and everything he did, because I didn't see anything regarding like, okay, let's do a tribute to Quincy Jones and all the greatness he's done for being in the industry for 60 years. And to me, it was hurtful because I was like, wow, like nothing? There's nothing for him? Like nothing?
Yep.
Nothing for Quincy? Do you guys know who Quincy Jones is? Obviously, no one cares, or the people who are in charge of the media didn't care, right? And so that was kind of hurtful in my mind. But luckily, people like you and me, we can talk and show respect to him, right? And honor him. Thank you, Quincy. I have so many things, but the last thing that I wanted to get to, and I'll get back to you, is there's, going back to the prison incarceration system, there was a documentary on Netflix where they did this experiment where they took all the correction officers out of the prison. And have you seen this one?
Yeah.
And they let the prisoners run themselves. What's your thoughts on that? And did you see that documentary?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't know if I saw all of it.
Okay.
But I saw the dynamics change, and
Okay.
I saw that there were people willing to take a chance at self-regulation and self-leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were people who, it was heady, probably, and who wanted maybe more than what others thought they should have. I thought it was interesting, and I think that there's promise in that. When you look at this country, California, and this country's penal system, it is much different than the penal systems or the prison systems in other countries, in other Western countries. We are the most inhumane prison in the Western world. Our system is built on punishment as opposed to helping victims or recognizing that most of the people who are incarcerated were themselves victims at one point, and the kind of circular nature of that. And so we see what they call recidivism rates, which is the rate at which a person returns to jail within, say, 3 years after they were released. And so we see high recidivism rates of 50% or better most of the time. And we wonder why. But I believe it's because we haven't embraced or understood what we should do when someone commits a crime. You have a country that was built by people who carried their trauma with them when they got here. When you look, there's a book called My Grandmother's Hands, I believe is the name of it. And it talks about European trauma, African trauma, and what they call blue trauma. And that's officers. And how our traumas show up with us. And we get into our pain bodies and our trauma bodies, and we don't even think, we just do. When you look at how we don't do anything but lip service to restorative justice. We pay a lot of lip service to that. It's been co-opted. There's some countries in Africa who could teach us something.
Can you explain what restorative justice is?
Yeah, it's where you make whole to restore. So say if a person has been robbed of something, to restore them would be to return their merchandise,
Okay.
right? If a person has been violated in their body or their person, then many restorative principles would say it's up to that person
To choose.
what they want. Do they want to talk to the person that violated them or no? What do they want? How do we restore people? So we got the punishment part down.
Okay.
You know, we excel at that. But are we helping the people who have been victimized by crime by simply locking someone up? If a person has lost a family member, is locking someone up what they want? And so there are some groups who are focused and led by victims of crime who have different ideas about what they'd like to see. But our system is so big, we have a penal economy. And what I mean by that,
A lot of money.
we are invested in that. And the only way to disinvest in that is to find something else for people to do. Do you have to be a CO, or is there other work that would benefit community and society? I think when you look at the stats of what correctional officers look like in terms of alcoholism and drug addiction, suicide rates, depression, and the mental illness themselves, from having a job that requires they cage someone and watch them every day, it takes a toll. There's no winners in the current system.
Yeah. It's interesting because I saw a video recently about a robot correction officer. So that might be the future, which is not a good future, but if they're already implementing it, then yeah, it was. And there were some interesting things that happened. I think someone attacked the robot and the robot responded as it was trained to do. And I just wrote this question down and I'm going to connect it to, because in my mind, I think people are always going to commit crimes. I think it's just part of people, right? And so, and I think people are always going to be put in prisons, or I call it timeout. People are going to have to be put in timeout. So Vonya, hypothetically speaking, let's say you were given $1 billion, right? And we're aware that people are still probably going to commit crimes and need to be put in timeout. Would you ever create your own private prison? And if so, how would you go about making it run and function?
No, I would never create a private prison. A private space, a private center, a private healing space. Yeah. And I agree. There's always going to be a percentage of people that are antisocial to the level that they cannot be with people. But 98% of the people that go to prison come home. Whether they come home successfully or not depends upon what we do in terms of reentry. And how, yeah, and how they reenter. So crime is interesting because crimes change. We add crimes to the books every day. There was a time when ponytails were outlawed in San Francisco because the Asian men wore ponytails. And some of the people in power felt like the Asians were taking their wives because the Asians had the hashish. And so what did they do? They made it against the law for a man to wear
a ponytail.
Yeah. And so we can criminalize whatever behavior we want. I work with people. I work with a gentleman who is amazing. His name is Richard. I'm not going to share his last name because I didn't ask him. But we're going to say Richard.
Okay.
Richard served almost 30 years in prison for taking money from Jack in the Box or robbing Jack in the Box. No weapon, no nothing. Drunk, jumped up on the counter and took money from the register. Walked out of the store. The undercover police were waiting for him outside. He threw the money up in the air. He was so drunk and watched it come down, and he went into handcuffs. When he was 27 years into prison, he went for a parole board hearing. They told him that he seemed like he was ready, but they weren't quite sure. Come back. At best, he would have gotten away with $300 of Jack in the Box's money. Jack in the Box would have gotten that money returned through insurance.
Yeah.
This man spent 28 or 29 years in prison for some money he didn't even get. There was no weapon involved. That's not justice. To me, that's a crime itself.
Yeah. A crime against a quote unquote crime.
Not just against him, against his children, against his family at home.
Yeah.
To me, that was a value statement. And that's what motivates me to do the work I do.
Ooh, I love that. Vonya, I want to thank you again for being here. So, you work, obviously, we've been talking about working with a lot of the incarcerated people, right? What have you learned about working with them? And then also about how society treats them after they've been rehabilitated with the silent R?
I think there's work to do in both areas. One is, I think people with criminal convictions are coming into organizations, adding value to this reentry work, adding value to work in general. And oftentimes their skill sets are different, or you might not see the technical skills that many of us have. So I think it's our challenge to value them in the workplace and accept what they bring to the workplace and use that, and then not confining them to their experiences. And what I mean by that is, you can share your experiences, and we're grateful that that you're able to share those. But you can also help us determine strategy. You can help us at the policy tables, so that we don't say this is your role, but allowing them to come in and lead. That, I think, is important to the movement, the community, and to their own personal worth and value. Is how we work with them. I forgot the other part of your question.
How society views the incarcerated and been treating the incarcerated.
So it's really been rough, and it is, in this time period, it feels like we're going through a reconstruction period, or the period following the reconstruction period. So at the end of slavery, there was this reconstruction period where black folks was coming in, and black folks was in style, right?
Okay.
They was in style for maybe a few years, 2 to 5 years, 2 to 7 years.
Yeah, well, people like wearing black folks, or like what's?
They weren't wearing them, but they was voting for them.
Got you. That was a joke.
Yeah, they was voting for them.
Got you.
All right, and so we had that period, and now we're going back to the backlash part. How do we make sure that this national framing of what it means to be a person convicted of a felony, which seems to be taking the emphasis off the humanity part and returning us to a time when it was okay to refer to people by their status, felon, convict.
Okay.
We are human beings and don't want to lose sight of that, or the efforts that have been put into helping society see our humanity, I think is important.
It reminds me when you say that about categorizing people. I remember hearing a lot of people who got locked up, they remember their number like it was yesterday. Do you remember your number?
N6357. Yep.
Isn't that interesting? I find that so, because correct me if I'm wrong, but the COs will address you by the number a lot, right?
That or inmate. So
Okay.
I don't know if they memorize people's numbers, but they would definitely address us by inmate. And I remember paroling and them being told on my way out, you have ruined your life. You can't vote. You're not going to be able to get a job. We'll hold your bed for you till you get back.
Okay, we'll be here for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, and that makes me think, because I believe you're a grandmother, right? You mentioned. What have you seen a connection between people who have been incarcerated and for their children to also be incarcerated? Have you seen a pattern in that?
Oh, the statistics are horrible. The last time I looked, it was like 70% of children who have a caretaking parent. That means a parent who's in their lives, who goes to jail or prison. That's their odds of going to jail or prison themselves. And so in doing work in the spaces that we do, we learned that we look at children's math test scores and determine who's going to jail and prison. And we began, in this state, we began to build prisons to satisfy what they thought was going to be the need. That money could have been taken to provide the services needed to that child so that child doesn't end up in there. And that's what I mean about values. How can you take money and build prisons for a child without giving the child the chance to change their trajectory? It's just, it's unbelievable. I just can't fathom a mind that would say, oh, they're going to prison, let's build the prison now, 15 years in advance.
Because it's not their children that are going.
Wow.
It's not their children, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's not
I
their
couldn't
children.
understand. Why would you do that? Why don't you just go fix it?
It's not their, this is my assumption, two things. It's not their children, and maybe they also have an investment in that prison,
Yeah, that part,
right?
yeah.
And two things. Well, the first thing is, this reminds me of the line, school to prison pipeline, right? And I've heard this term so many times, but maybe you can give me your opinion about what that term actually means.
The school to prison pipeline?
Yes.
So we're talking systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about this. When I was a kid, maybe when you were a kid, they had counselors in schools.
Okay.
Counselors were replaced by sheriff's officers or school officers, by police.
Okay.
When children go to jail, statistically speaking, they are most often in school. So that means the schools have decided to call the police. The child is arrested, and that becomes a school to prison pipeline. And so, and then after the arrest, so they came up with something called youth accountability teams, where they would put children who are what they call at risk into these programs. They'd have to report to probation. The district attorney was part of it. All the players, except for public defenders. And so anytime in this state that you have a district attorney and it's criminal, then you should also have a public defender just to make sure that it's balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And so systemically it was flawed, but then they wanted to count the youth accountability team work and that committee as part of supervision. So if a child got in trouble after the youth accountability team, they would be escalated to juvenile hall or some detention place for them, or probation. And so that school to prison pipeline is real. And as more and more people become aware of it, are more understanding that it's not officers that we need, it could be health providers, counselors, therapists, so that if a youth is exhibiting behaviors that are showing that they need help, they have that help. That help doesn't have to be handcuffs. And most of the children who are handcuffed at school already have what they call IEPs open. So the school is aware that there are some problems.
What are IEPs?
Individual education plans.
What does that mean?
That means that, say your child is at school and demonstrating a special need, whether it's behavioral or education, you can have an IEP meeting with the school and ask the school to provide or help to provide whatever services are needed. And they begin to do evaluations. You can get a mental health evaluation or something for your child if you believe that there could be a mental health reason why they're seeing behaviors. Oftentimes, when the behaviors show up, they automatically think it's a behavioral meeting, but sometimes it could be autism, it could be ADHD, or a lot of other things. And a child should get the support and not the handcuffs.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for informing us. You know, I think I saw, it said Vonya Quarles, Esquire. So are you a lawyer, technically a lawyer?
Yep, technically I'm a lawyer, and technically I still practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it true that when you applied for law school, you got denied because of your background?
Yeah. So this was in the early 2000s when I went to law school, and there weren't a lot of people with felony convictions who were applying for law school. And so they didn't know what to do. It's like, oh no, they're not going to let you pass the bar. No, you can't. Or they have policies at the school where you can't attend. There's this whole,
But isn't education for everybody, even the
yeah, it
incarcerated?
should be. It should be, especially if you're paying for it.
Yeah. Okay. Continue. Yeah. Continue.
Yep. So I was turned down over and over. Long Beach's Pacific Coast University accepted me. The dean contacted me when I went to meet with him, and he told me, you know what? Well, if you really want to come here, we'll let you come here, but you're probably never going to be barred. They'll never let you practice. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I won't practice, but I can still go and learn, and I'd be able to be of some use. And so I went anyway, and it was a 2-year moral character determination process before I was granted the right to practice in California, which most people it takes, anywhere from 3 months to maybe 6 months. But we had to go back and forth a lot because they wanted to be thoroughly convinced that I was no longer that person anymore, even though it had been 20 years since any police contact. So it was a bit extreme. And then you look at, you look at some attorneys who have experiences after they're barred. Mine just happened before. So,
Interesting. And
yeah.
you would, so they ask you, or like, what is criminal records, even background checks, or even for schools now? Is that a thing?
They ask you on the admission application at
Okay.
schools about your criminal convictions.
Why do they need to know?
Well, that's a good question. Let's ban the box on that. Let's ban to me, the whole box thing was a way to be discriminatory without saying that you're discriminatory, because we know that disproportionately the criminal so-called legal system impacts Black and brown people at a much higher rate. So if everybody's looking at criminal background checks, they don't care that the system is flawed anyway by design. They just use the background checks, and that gives them the cover they need to practice whatever they want to practice. And so one way was saying, have you ever been convicted of a crime? You say yes, and say, Bill Shepard, a white guy, says yes. Your application is more than 9 times out of 10 going into the trash. Mr. Shepard might get a call back, depending upon what school he went to and his zip code, because they can tell.
Yeah. And even him with a criminal background and me without a criminal background, he could still possibly win, and it's been proven as well.
Yep.
And I guess people probably use the argument, oh, well, we asked because we don't want any violence or on our campus and blah, blah, blah.
And there's no empirical data to show that a person with a criminal conviction is going to be any more or less violent on a school campus or an employment site or anywhere else than anyone else. They don't have that data, but the assumption and the premise is in place.
Wow. And yeah, it's just it's so crazy, because it's like, wow, is that really that much power where they can actually ban someone from education and the bar because of their background? It's like, can't you see that, going back to the values thing, can't you see that I'm trying to better myself and better society by learning law? Or here's another, I guess, perspective is, do you see that I'm trying to do that and you're trying to prevent me from doing that?
Yeah, which is kind of like devious, huh?
Yeah, why not? He who has the power, he who has the gold makes the rules,
Yeah.
as they say.
Yeah.
Who has the power? Yeah.
So some friends of mine started this bar group for formerly incarcerated people, because
Gotcha.
we shouldn't be an anomaly, or it should be common. If people who go to jail and prison oftentimes want to obtain legal knowledge and want to help. They were doing it in there. When they come home, they want to do it. So there was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 of us in the state that kind of connected with each other and found out that, you know what, they should open the door. There should be more of us here. And so they're working to do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Hopefully it's a dry bar. So,
And then they have the other bar, which is a group of people who have stopped using drugs and alcohol. And they support each other. a network of attorneys who do that. That's the other bar.
Cool. I
Yeah.
like that. It should be called bar one and the other bar. I like that.
Yep.
Bars. They got
Yep.
bars, folks. Wachoo, 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 wachoo.
Yep.
Bars. So you mentioned earlier that you were in the foster system when you were younger. I believe you also deal with the foster system currently, right? I've heard so much ever since. I remember. I think I first heard it in college, but I've been hearing it, every so often, that there's been a big dissatisfaction with the foster care system. What's your thoughts on it, and why? Or do you have any?
Yeah, I do. And our Family Reunification, Equity, and Empowerment Project is what we call free. And it works with people who have their children in foster care and who are trying to navigate that whole system, or people who've had their children adopted out. So we are working on repealing ASFA, which is the Adoption and Safe Family Act. Because for a lot of reasons, the federal government has monetized states to increase adoptions, and foster care gets funding from the federal government as well as the state for that. And I don't know if you know, but there were some laws that passed, I want to say probably 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know when for sure, Antonio, but what they did was they limited the amount of aid that a mother could get from the county. And so it was because, and this is what was said at the time, people are just having babies so they can get money from the county.
The common saying.
Yeah, and a lot of people believe that. If you could live off $300 a month and then get an extra $300 a month for each child, a person with a family of 4 would only have $1,200 a month to live on. And if you had any other income, it would reduce your amount of aid. So that whole notion of people having babies to get more welfare was a myth, but it was just as effective as the welfare queen story that went around. And so then you get all these people pumped up, and what they decided to do was limit the amount of money that a mother could get regardless of how many children she had. And so, single parents do what they think they need to do, and many of them would take jobs and not have the welfare check, but then they had issues with childcare. So oftentimes, poverty looks like neglect. And so there's a difference between poverty and neglect. But our system will give that mother $500 a month for her and her child, but will pay a foster mother $1,500 or $1,600 a month to care for the very same child.
Yeah.
And so we are, again, investing in what we want to create more of. And if we want to create more children in foster care, we should go and examine the outcomes. What are the deliverables looking like? And you will see a foster care to prison pipeline, foster care to human trafficking, foster care to dropout rates. They're all horrible for children in foster care. Now, granted, usually when a child comes to foster care, they've already been exposed to trauma. They need supportive services, they need help, but breaking the sacred tie of mother and child, or father and child, or family and child, there are repercussions to that. So we are breaking families and investing heavily in doing so, as opposed to looking at alternatives to family displacement. What if instead of removing the child, we had someone whose role was to go into the home, support the mother, identify any areas that need to be addressed, whether it's substance use, mental health, child care, any of those things, and address those things as we find them. But we would rather say this family is unworthy. We're just mean. We're just mean for no reason. And we don't, and oftentimes we look at a system based on what we're told or what that system is purporting to be, as opposed to what it actually is. And that's where the critical thinking becomes imperative, is you can't look at me based on what I say I am without taking in the totality of evidence around me, right? That I mean, I can't be just who I say I am. There are other things that need to inform my decision about who I am or who you are as a person. And and we have to do the same thing with the systems. We have to analyze them and be critical of them. And if they're good, great. But if they're not, they need to be held accountable, just like we hold poor people accountable. We need to hold our systems accountable.
Wow, it makes me think that I guess the only loophole for, a mother who might, let's say that she's healthy, but she's getting $300 a month, right? And a woman who could adopt a child and get $1,500 for the same child, it almost makes me think that the mother should adopt her own child in order to get the $1,500.
Wow. And the 1,500, that's the baseline. If the child has
Like autism or something?
yes, it's 5,000 a month. And it's like, why can't we just invest in the family structure? It's like, and then there's the other thing of how a social worker's bias could come into the home and look at the home a certain way, regardless of what's really going on. They can't see what's really going on because their bias is leading. And so how do you correct for that? How do we correct for the fact that social workers can write a report with no oversight and that they can include hearsay from anyone they talk to? And, we've had struggles and challenges with social workers that we've come in contact with, both me in my personal life, but more importantly, in my work life, because social workers come to our housing programs because we house women with children. They will come into our housing program and tell our house managers horrific stories about the program participant. And we have come to find that many of those stories were untrue. And so they tell you an untruth, they tell you something so horrible, they're hoping that you come out of your mouth with other horrible stuff because now you don't like this person.
They're trying to bait you. They're trying to bait them.
They do. And it's unbelievable.
Why do you think a social worker would do such a thing
I-
if their job is to better society?
I think they really believe that they're bettering society, or at least bettering this child's life sometimes. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt in this scenario. But there are times when it's so personal to them, they lose sight of it. They lose sight of the truth. And now, because you didn't respond to them the way they wanted you to, or you were angry because they took your child and you let them know that you were angry, or you wanted to stand firmly on your rights, you pissed the social worker off. It could take you years to get your child, even after complying with everything the court has asked you to do. And that's because they have the power of the pen.
Yep.
And they can halt a report, fail to report things that could be reported that appear in your favor. All that can be left out of the report. And parents don't get to write a report. And that's what we push for in our family reunification project. Write your report. The social worker's writing a report. We're going to show you how to write a report. You write a report, give it to your attorney. You want it on the record. Because that's all the judge is going to look at. And if all he has is that social worker's report, true or not, that's what he's going by.
Yeah. And, a social worker could just wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day and show up. They didn't get to have their eggs and oatmeal with sausage, and they show up to a day. Wow,
Or they take somebody's baby and the lady snap on you. Have some understanding. You took her heart. You took her heart. Yes, she's angry. Or just because it don't look like your mama house, don't mean it's not a house filled with love.
Yeah, if you see do-rags and hot combs all over the place, there's no need to get upset. It's like, I wish I could wear them. I wish I could wear that. Why is this comb so hot? Vonya, you've been involved in this work for over 20 years. Can I say that at least?
Yeah, go for it.
Right? At least 20 years, over 20 years. Right now, currently, what are some of your biggest concerns with society and the system?
Misinformation is hurting causes, people, and there's no way around it.
Give us an example of some misinformation.
Yeah. For example, crime. if you listen to people who want to reinvest in prison, you would think that crime was going up. And it was going up here because of certain things that California has done. Crime trends go up and down nationally, and California aligns with national crime stats. Violent crimes are down, property crimes are up, but it's fluctuating. It's not like crime is trending up. We have enjoyed the lowest crime rates that we've seen in decades and decades. And so misinformation says stuff like, crime is up, you're not safe, trust us, we're going to help you. That is misinformation. Police are responsive. They don't prevent crime. They respond to reports of crime. Mm-hmm. They solve less than 5% of crime that's happened. So to buy into a narrative that's telling you need us to be safe, vote against your interest, give us the money, is misinformation. And we see it with the county budgets. We see it with the state budget, that at least with the county budgets, like 74 to 76% of county budgets go to what we call public safety at the expense of the very things that will make us safer. If we invest in housing, mental health, education, childcare, youth services, those things would give us a safer community. And it's misinformation, I think, that causes us to vote against our interests.
That's heavy. When we talked about the incarceration and the incarcerated youth and people getting incarcerated in general, in your opinion, how important do you think having strong families are to preventing people from committing crimes and being incarcerated?
I think it's important, but sometimes it's unattainable. And what I mean by that is, I think if we have strong families, that's probably 50% of the struggle. But there are people in our communities that we probably all know who might not have a strong family. And so they have to make do with the community or their chosen family. So I think it's important, but I don't think it's necessary. Some of us have to start where we're at with who we have in our life. That's what I think. Hopefully I answered it.
Yeah, no.
Right.
However, whatever comes to you, we'll take it. It's kind of like, when the cat gets a hairball, it's like, okay,
that was my hairball.
Yeah, take it.
That was my hairball.
I want to take us off path a little bit, and it's probably going to ruin the flow, but I want to play a quick game with you. It's called Quick Slip. I'm going to give you a word, and I want as quick as first thing that comes to your mind. I want you to tell us what comes to your mind. Okay?
That's scary. Okay.
You ready to play?
Yeah.
All right, Quick Slip. Here we go. Kids.
Children.
Trump.
Loser.
God.
Love.
Therapy.
Help.
Unsheltered.
Naked.
Popcorn.
Puzzle.
OnlyFans.
You said what kind of fan?
OnlyFans.
I don't know what that is.
What comes to mind?
OnlyFans. Kendrick Lamar.
Group home.
Struggle.
Business.
Choices.
Clowns.
Safety.
Incarceration.
Poison.
The system.
Changeable.
Black people.
Love.
The future.
Now.
Thank you.
All
Quick
right.
slip.
All right, that was different.
Not too bad, right?
Yeah. So it almost feels like a test, like like they have some tests when you go for job applications where they give you these words, or you have to look at these things and say what it means or what it looks like. That's what that one kind of felt like.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making me think of the blob test, when people like psychologists have like a blob and they show the patient. What do you think this blob means?
I have no idea.
That game will be coming soon, folks. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for playing. You've been in law and studying people, society, everything. You know, you're a grandmother, so you're seeing even the youth grow up today, right? One of the people who helped make the change, right? The
Yep.
torch, right? Um, what's something that's happening in the system that majority of people don't know, but you think they should know?
Change. And I can only compare it to a pendulum. And so the last decade, we have seen resources into communities and investments. What we saw in 2020, a big change from funders and health departments actually looking at racial equity as a public health crisis. Both San Bernardino and Riverside County declared racism to be a public health crisis. And I think we are in the middle of what we call a sea change, a dramatic shift from that backwards. So we're seeing this pendulum swing right now in real time. And hopefully we don't have to do what's done before, whether it was the Reconstruction period, the Civil Rights period, the Black Power movement period. Hopefully we don't take as long or allow as much time to pass without responding with our hearts and our full self to signal and indicate that we are not going back. We can't.
So what do you think most people should know?
That it's time to act. That you can't put activism on someone else. I think that we all have to be actors. We all have to be vigilant and find our voice. And if you're not currently organized, you don't have to be. But I think what's important is knowing that you can't delegate your activism to other people, because only you can do the activism that's for you. And so I would encourage people to engage, become active. And voting is just the first step. You know, once a person is elected, or once a initiative passed, there needs to be someone watching to making sure that the law is being followed. So, you know, we've done work the past decade or so and passed all these great laws, but the follow through or the accountability has been short. And so sometimes it takes the form of litigation. We have to sue somebody to get what was supposed to have been law done. And so we've done that a few times when it comes to voting or purging criminal records. We've had to do that locally. And so,
Can you give us an example of a situation or a case?
yeah, voting, there was an issue in Riverside County about the folks in jail having access to voting ballots. So if you're not convicted of a crime, at the time it was if you weren't convicted of a crime and you were in jail and hadn't been sentenced, you had a right to vote. And so that was about 75% of the people in the county jails have the right to vote. Many of them don't know that or weren't given ballot initiatives, and so we wanted to make sure that they were actually getting them. And the other one was around purging marijuana records. Marijuana records are supposed to be purged in 2 years, and that wasn't happening. And that was a mandate by law. And so we always talk about, you know, laws and crimes and breaking the laws. And again, it gets me back to the point of who we hold accountable for breaking laws and who we don't, you know, hold accountable. And so getting back to what people should know about the system is that it's movable, it changes, but only in response to the people. Everything that happened during the civil rights era, it wasn't because the courts responded to the people. So when those cases came by, you know, Martin Luther King and NAACP, SNCC and CORE, those were cases that had groundswell, right? And they had the attention of those justices. We have you know, some people will argue about the judges that we have right now, yes. But so we have to verbalize and vocalize what we want to happen outside. There's an inside game and an outside game. The inside game gets power from the outside game. We have to do both, and we need people to do that. It's not going to be lawyers. It's not going to be doctors. Ain't nobody coming to save us.
Wow, you know, it makes me think when you say it's ever changing, it makes me think like the system is a breathable, like it's alive and it's breathing and it's moving and it's
Oh,
changing.
Antonio, they start using your same language. When you talking about, oh, we want restorative justice, you got them talking about restorative justice. You talking about change. Oh yeah, they just pick up your lingo, co-opt it, and keep doing what they want to do to maintain the system. And you're right, it's breathable, it's alive. And so people talk about abolition. We have to talk about building. We have to talk about building something to replace what we have. And that's really what the work is. Building the systems that we want and starving those systems that are hurting us.
Yeah, and when you mention, people, activism, right? For one of the things people know, in my opinion, I believe not everybody people do want change, but not everybody wants to be out on the streets, with the picket signs. I think you mentioned one way to help fight is by litigation, right? What other ways do you think for people who want change, but it's not in their spirit to go out on the streets? What are some other ways you think people can be activists towards something better?
Talking to people, listening to people, writing letters, op-eds, communicating
Okay.
with, and it doesn't have to be with the whole world. It's with my own immediate circle.
Are we activating right now?
I hope so.
I feel like it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I love that. You know, I think you mentioned it earlier, but I'll ask again. What motivates you to still keep going?
I think it's my children and grandchildren and the hope and belief that we got this, that we can create the world we need. We can co-create the world we need with each other. And I think you said it, getting beyond the divisiveness of, everything, and realizing that at the very core, we are human and we all want to be safe.
Vonya, I want to thank you so much for speaking with us and sitting down. Um, there's a guy outside bumping his music. You know who you are. You know who you are. Um, I first heard this lady's name, I think the Romaine Washington, yes. But I also saw her name in your email that you left. Her name is Audre Lorde, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Does she mean anything to you? And if so, can you explain?
She was an amazing leader in her time. She was a Black woman. She's gay. She was gay, and she was courageous. And she acknowledges to me the fear that I experience, but also getting beyond that. So I think one of the quotes that you might have seen was about her talking about moving in spite of the fear, something to that effect. And that is what I'm learning to do on the daily is, okay, so this is new, this is different. Even this whole thing with the podcast, it's new, it's different. Sometimes talking to people, not knowing the audience is frightening, can be intimidating, or speaking truth to power when I don't feel I have enough or have any. It always brings me a certain amount of fear, but the more I walk through it, the more I know that I can get to the other side of it. And it's okay if my voice shakes or my knees get, wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right because others have walked it before me and have done it before me, and I'm gonna be all right.
I like that, and number one, Vonya, thank you for your work. Thank you for all you've done. I want to personally just tell you that. Thank you. Thank you. And me personally, I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching a musician perform. I think his name's Wyatt Flores. And he got emotional, and he started forgetting some of his words when he was singing. And personally, going back to you saying your voice is trembling and your legs shaking, I like to see those things because it shows me that you're human, like all of us. I like to see people show their imperfections because it's like, yeah, none of us here is perfect. And it shows us the vulnerability, and it's like, I can connect with that. And I think as performers or, public speakers, we kind of get concerned about, oh yeah, I messed up or whatever. But it's like, if people are not looking from a judging point, but looking from a part of like, yeah, I make mistakes too. I'm still with you. Continue. And I have a background in piano performance and music. And I remember another piano player asked me, he was like, what do you do if you mess up? I said, you just keep going. People will hear it, but as soon as you keep going, they'll forget about it. They'll just focus on what you're currently doing. And I use the example of like, hey, imagine you're driving, you see a good-looking girl, a good-looking lady on the street, you take a look, but you go back to driving because you're driving. You don't want to stay focused on the person on the street, you'll crash. You just keep driving, you keep going. People only remember the beginning and the end anyway. So just keep going. No one will worry about it.
That's beautiful. And let me say thank you for the work that you do. Just, having a podcast, sharing yourself with other people in here and with all the people in the podcast universe. I think you stand out to me as a witness, as a listener, and someone who is not just about this podcast here, but I really felt like we've exchanged ideas, and that is activism. So I just want to thank you for your activism and the work that you do.
Thank you. Of course, that's what we do here on the Empire. We just, we have a good time. We laugh. We talk. We have enlightened discussions to uplift people, because you can have low grade, low frequency, or we can have high frequency. And the only way to have change representation is to bring to a high frequency and show that we have high frequency people, right? And to uplift people, show there's other sides to us. There's not just one side. We're not one-sided people. We're icebergs.
All right, gotcha.
Hey! So Vonya, what's something that most people don't know about you, even close friends? And it could be anything. It could be like, hey, I like to wear pink rubber band in my hair. It could be anything.
I'm a poet and I'm shy. Well, some of my close friends know it, but most people don't know it. I am truly an introvert, and I like writing.
Okay. Is there any other juicy thing you want to share that someone else might know, not even close friends?
No.
It could be anything.
Yeah, no.
No? Do you know any poems by heart and would like to share with us?
It's been a while.
Okay.
Let me see. Martyrs we have made of them, those whose name with M begins. I think I shall never name a son with that letter M as one. Martin, Malcolm, Martin. I don't know the rest. But anyway, I was feeling it one day because I think someone with the letter M, and I don't remember which one, had just passed away. And it was like, I started thinking of Martin, Malcolm,
Marcus?
yeah, Marcus, and it might have been Mandela. And I was just thinking about how all them were so profound and how much they gave to us, and that maybe I should just avoid that letter M. Don't ever name any of my children with the letter M, because they give so much. I think it was like, those who so many lives did touch, a mother I am, but faint of heart to give my son such a blessed start. And then it just goes on. I can't remember the whole thing, but.
Hey, no, thanks for sharing. Do you remember the title?
The letter M.
The letter M.
Yeah.
Got you. So it's kind of more like a mother's fear and protection of her child, of her son, most likely, a boy.
Yeah. And then, like when I was going through a divorce, I got onto my I am she, soft, helpful energy, simple, happy entity, offset Isis, patiently picking up pieces, faithfully putting them back together. I was scorned, and so that was one of them kind of poems.
Okay, scorched earth.
Yeah.
She was an angry woman. She was saying, she was angry, like, kill everyone with the Y chromosome, die. ISIS. For ladies and gentlemen, if you may not know, ISIS is Egyptian god who I believe put her son back together.
Yes.
That was chopped into pieces.
Yep. And that is where some people say the Trinity came from. Was her, the Father, and the Son.
Which, Isis, Osiris, and what was the son's name?
Seth.
Seth. And so there is a lot of similarities, and you can actually see it in the imagery. But we won't go there, folks. You guys do your own research. You could find it. Vonya Quarles, thank you so much for being on The Empire. What's some of the current projects that you're working on?
Seth or Haru?
Haru.
Okay, Haru.
Okay, because I think Seth is a biblical name for sure. Yeah.
And I think it's in Egyptian stories as well, but it was Haru.
That sounds right.
Or Horus.
Horus was what I was thinking. I was thinking Horus.
I think that was the Greek name or something they gave him.
Yeah, because Horus, I think, is the falcon. I almost think, or the symbol is the falcon for Horus. Yeah,
so
Egyptian history.
Haru. Yeah.
So amazing. Which comes from Ethiopian, which you guys probably didn't realize.
No, I thought Kemet was older than Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is before the Egyptian or Kemetic.
I believe so.
Yeah. You know what? You're probably right, because it is one of the first civilizations, or maybe the first in Africa. And we do sometimes forget that Egypt is sitting right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about the Nile, which I think is super interesting, is the only river that goes from south to north.
Wow.
Every river goes from north to south. And so the Nile, so let's think about this, right? If you're Ethiopian and you go in the Nile, it's going to send you up to Egypt.
Wow. Okay.
And there's also many pyramids in Egypt and in Nubia, stuff like that. And so I like to think that they were doing their practice pyramids until they got to Egypt and like, okay, now I think we're ready for the big boys.
Yeah. And you know what? The pyramids in South America, a lot of people believe that was through the African travelers coming to the Americas and helping to show them the technology, for lack of a better word, and building the pyramids and sustaining themselves and their civilization.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And shout out to Ivan van Sertima, who wrote the book They Came Before Columbus.
Yep.
So, 100%. Yeah. 100%. There's so much similarities. And
yeah, we're relatives.
Yeah. I thought there was something interesting because there's a tribe called the Olmec, which is the oldest civilization in the Americas. And they have these big, which people would say have African features, heads,
the nose,
right?
The heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this says so much about racism that when the European founders founded it, they said the reason why these African-liked heads, facial features, who had cornrows, some of them had cornrows, the reason why their lips were big and their nose was flat was because the head fell on its face.
All of them, huh?
They said that's the reason why.
Yeah, all the heads fell on their face.
Hey, apparently stone, if you drop a stone on its face, it gets flat. So that's so interesting. And so I'm not sure if I asked you this question, but I think I did, but I'll ask it again because I kind of got distracted here. What are some of the current projects you're working on, Vonya?
The Ruchell Mcgee Community Land Trust.
Okay.
And then the succession plan for starting over, and the Family Reunification, Equity, and Empowerment Project. We want to repeal ASFA.
What's the succession plan?
The succession plan is for the organization. So when we started, we didn't have anything. The organization starting over. Mm-hmm. There were no resources. So now, it's different. I think there's 29 people on staff now, and we have some resources. I want to help make sure that I'm not throwing a hot potato at someone who comes in after me, but actually, creates a sustainability plan for the organization that they can use or discard, whatever they want to do with it.
Okay.
But at least have it in place.
Got you. Instead of throwing like a hot potato or like, a fireball, you want to hand it over like if you're passing a newborn baby over.
It's my baby.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Oh, wow. How difficult does that feel actually in your mind, thinking about handing it over to somebody and choosing the right person or people to hand it over?
Yeah, I never thought that I would get here. And I had mentors who have made those transitions, who have helped me to see that there's life after stepping away. And there's so much that I can do to help and, somewhere else. So go do it. I mean, this is up and running now for the most part. And we use a leadership circle model. So there's 9 of us who are the leaders that make up the leadership circle. The organization is full of leaders. So there's leaders all throughout the organization, but the 9 of us kind of set course, make decisions and take care of our staff and team, worry about the external, work that goes on. So that's no longer it's no longer a one person show. And so have been sharing it. And so now I'm ready to step away because they have it.
Okay, everything's been set up and it's its own breathing entity.
Yeah. And they're good because they've been part of the setting it up. So,
Great.
yeah.
So I asked you about current projects, I guess, and immediately you went to work, right? You went to that work mind. But what current projects would you like to do or work on outside of, starting over in Corp?
Just family stuff, really.
Okay.
Gardening. I'm raising 2 of my grandchildren. And then I want to spend, more time. I think time is critical. I know, hey, yeah, I would be talking about time.
Yeah.
I'm at the age where we understand how important time is. And it's the one thing that we can't purchase and we don't get it back. So
Yeah.
I want to make the time that I have valuable to the people around me, the people that I love. And so that would, of course, mean my children, my grandchildren, my friends, and just chilling.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. And thank you for spending your time with us and sharing your story. Vonya, let's say 100 years pass by, 250 years pass by. What would you like your empire to look like, whether involving family, community service, fixing the injustice system, gardening? What would you like your empire to look like 250 years from now when people say, who was Vonya Quarles?
Healthy and loving. Healthy and able to show love and give love. And so what that would look like, I don't know. I can't even imagine the world in 200 years from now. I think about Octavia Butler, who was my favorite science fiction writer. She was, I was able to get into science fiction through her. And she had a very, very prophetic view of the future. And we see it now unfolding. But it was always about belonging. And that's what I'd like to see in the future. I don't know if it's going to be my empire or yours, but that's the empire that I would like to see, what would be a place where we all belong and we all have something to contribute in a place.
I like that. I like that. So I assume you watch some of the Marvel movies?
Yeah, which ones?
I don't know. Do you have a favorite superhero?
Well, of course, I like Black Panther.
Okay.
But before Black Panther, I liked Iron Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Iron Man. You're a Tony Stark type of gal. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Vonya, thank you so much for sharing with us and spending time with us. Can you please let everybody know how they can find you, support you, maybe get some information they can help themselves, help others with? Can you please let everybody know how they can do that?
Yeah. If it's work related, we have a website. It's startingoverinc.org. And that has everyone's contact information. Mine is on there as well. Feel free to reach out. And then I'm on social media, Vonya Quarles, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll have all those things in the description. So if you guys need to click on it, you can do it that way to find her. Vonya, is there anything else you'd like to say before we get out of here?
Thank you.
Welcome. De nada. De nada. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Empire. Please like the video if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you want to support us and support this great work, we have CASHAPP, which is THEE Empire Podcast. We also have PayPal and other ways to help contribute to keep this work going. It's in the description. Other than that, I think we're good, and we'll catch you guys all in the next episode. Okay? Peace.
Bye-bye.
I say it's my duty. Yeah. Is it
And you're going to edit that earlier stuff out?